Welcome to the deep dive. When you think of the Arctic, you probably picture ice, maybe polar bears. Not exactly a geopolitical hotspot.
That used to be true,
Yeah.
but the picture's changing fast. The Arctic, long seen as this zone of peaceful scientific work, is really heating up now, geopolitically, militarily. It's quite surprising.
Absolutely. And what was maybe on the edge of global strategy is now, well, front and center for major powers.
Exactly. Today we're digging into an insightful article from The Hindu, which really unpacks this shift.
And for you listening, especially if you're preparing for the UPSC exams, understanding this whole Arctic transformation is frankly crucial. It connects to India's strategic interests, international relations, even potential economic impacts. So think of this as a way to get up to speed on a really vital current affairs topic. Good for mains, maybe even prelims points here.
Definitely. And consider this question. We know melting Arctic ice means rising sea levels. That's the environmental story we all hear. But what if that same melting ice is also creating brand new global trade routes?
And redrawing the map of military power.
Precisely. That's the core of what we're exploring today.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What's the main force driving this big change in the Arctic?
Well, the Hindu article points squarely at climate change. It's the fundamental catalyst. The Arctic is warming, the ice is melting, and that's literally reshaping the region.
And the most critical impact is the opening of the Northern Sea Route, the NSR.
Yes, exactly. That's the shipping lane along Russia's northern coast.
Why is that specific route becoming such a big deal?
Okay, imagine a shipping route from Europe to Asia that could be, say, 40% shorter than going through the Suez Canal.
Wow, 40%, that's huge.
It's potentially transformative. Historically, the NSR was blocked by ice most of the year, but with the ice shrinking, it's navigable for longer periods. Some even talk about year-round navigation becoming feasible.
Which would completely reroute global trade flows.
It had that potential, yes.
Yeah.
And it's not just the route itself. The article also mentions the resources.
Right, the untapped wealth beneath the ice.
Exactly. Huge reserves, we think, of oil, gas, valuable minerals, stuff that was basically impossible to get to before.
So easier access makes them attractive targets for exploitation.
Understandably, yes. It fuels interest and, inevitably, competition. So you've got this double whammy, a super efficient new trade route potentially opening up, and access to vast natural resources. Put them together.
And the Arctic becomes a geopolitical hotspot.
You got it.
And this increased access, this potential wealth, it's happening alongside a military buildup. The article uses the phrase, steady march of militarization.
Yes, that's a key point. Arctic nations are seriously beefing up their military presence there.
How so? What does that look like?
We're seeing old, dormant military bases being reactivated. Upgrades to operational capabilities, think more submarine patrols, more sophisticated surveillance, shows of force, more capable icebreakers. It signals a much more permanent, robust military commitment than before.
The article does say military activity isn't totally new there.
True, it's not brand new. There's always been some level of military presence. But the scale, the intensity, the investment, yeah, that's what's different. It's a significant intensification.
Is there a specific example that sort of highlights this shift in thinking?
Well, remember back in 2019, the proposal by the then U.S. president to buy Greenland.
Yes, that caused quite a stir.
It did. But beyond the headlines, the underlying message was clear. The Arctic's strategic value had skyrocketed in the eyes of major world powers. It was a symbolic, if maybe clumsy, indicator of these high stakes.
Okay, so the region's heating up geopolitically. Now, the Hindu article shifts focus to India, describing its current stance as, what was the phrase, paradoxically subdued.
Yes, paradoxically subdued. It's an interesting framing.
Let's unpack that. What's paradoxical about it?
Well, India actually released its first comprehensive Arctic policy in 2022. And it's a good policy in many ways. It's clear it focuses strongly on climate science, environmental protection, sustainable development, all very important goals.
And it connects Arctic changes to our own region, right? The Himalayas.
Exactly. It makes that crucial link between what happens at the pole and water security in South Asia, drawing a parallel to the Himalayan third pole. So there's definitely recognition of the scientific and environmental significance.
So the policy acknowledges the science. Where's the paradox then?
The paradox, according to the article's analysis, lies in this primary focus. While the scientific dimension is vital, the policy seems, perhaps, less attuned to the rapidly accelerating geopolitical competition we've just discussed.
So the argument is that India's principled science-first approach might be a bit Out of sync.
Potentially, yes. Out of sync with the changing strategic realities on the ground. It's a posture that might not fully address the emerging power dynamics.
India does have a presence, though. Observer status in the Arctic Council, research activities in Svalbard.
Correct. And those footholds are important. But they were largely established back when the Arctic was seen through that lens of cooperation in science.
An era that might be fading.
That seems to be the trend. As geopolitical rivalry intensifies, that cooperative environment is eroding. The article suggests that relying mainly on what it calls scientific diplomacy, while still valuable, might risk leaving India marginalized if it doesn't adapt to these harsher geopolitical currents.
Which brings us to the core question for India. Why does all this matter? It feels geographically distant, but the article insists it's not.
It absolutely insists, and this is critical for UPSC aspirants to grasp. These aren't distant concerns. The article points to very tangible potential consequences for India.
Such as?
Well, think about the Northern Sea Route again. If it becomes a major global shipping artery,
It could challenge India's traditional influence over the Indian Ocean routes.
exactly, it could put pressure on those routes, potentially impacting India's own vision for Indo-Pacific connectivity. That's a direct strategic implication.
And then there's the Russia-China angle.
Yes. Their deepening collaboration in the Arctic is significant. Combine that with China's increasing naval presence in the Indian Ocean.
It starts to blur the lines between the Arctic and the Indo-Pacific.
Precisely. The strategic geography starts to look different. It forces India to reassess its regional security calculations, doesn't it? It's no longer two separate theaters.
And India's relationship with Russia complicates things further, diplomatically.
It does. It presents a delicate balancing act. India has long-standing ties with Russia. But Russia's actions, particularly in Ukraine, are viewed very differently by, say, the Nordic states,
Who are major Arctic players.
key Arctic players. So India faces scrutiny. It needs to navigate this carefully and articulate how its principle of strategic autonomy aligns with the interests of potential partners in this new, more contested Arctic landscape. It's a complex diplomatic challenge.
Okay, so given these challenges and the shifting landscape, what does the Hindu article suggest India should do? What's the path forward for a more, say, purposeful Arctic engagement?
The article argues for a strategic recalibration, not abandoning the environmental focus, that's still key, but balancing it with a much stronger geopolitical awareness and strategy.
A balancing act.
It suggests a multi-pronged approach. Three main pillars, really.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, institutionalize Arctic engagement within the government. This means things like setting up dedicated Arctic desks in the Ministry of External Affairs, perhaps even defense.
Making it a formal part of the bureaucracy.
Yes, and ensuring regular coordination between different agencies, working with think tanks too, to build a really robust, joined-up policy framework. Less ad hoc, more strategic.
Right, makes sense. What's the second pillar?
Second, actively seek partnerships with like-minded Arctic states, but smartly. The article suggests focusing on dual-use areas.
Dual use, meaning?
Things like polar logistics, maritime domain awareness, knowing what ships are where, using satellite monitoring, for instance. These have civilian applications, but also enhance strategic capabilities.
So building capacity and credibility without overt militarization.
Exactly. It allows India to deepen engagement and build trust in practical ways that align with its current posture, but also serve future strategic needs.
Okay, institutionalize, build practical partnerships. What's the third element?
The third is about governance. As the Arctic opens up, new rules and standards are needed for infrastructure, for shipping, for managing the blue economy. India needs to actively seek a seat at the table in these emerging forums.
To help shape the rules of the game.
Precisely. To influence the standards being set, and also, crucially, to engage respectfully with local Arctic communities whose lives are most directly impacted.
So wrapping this up, the core argument from the Hindus seems to be India's current Arctic policy, strong on science and environment, is valuable.
Very valuable, yes.
But it's becoming insufficient on its own because the Arctic itself is fundamentally changing.
Exactly. The ground is shifting from principle-driven cooperation, mostly, towards more overt power politics.
And the risk for India, if it doesn't adapt, is being sidelined, watching a new Arctic order form without having much say.
That's the risk highlighted. Therefore, the call is for a more integrated approach, one that keeps environmental consciousness front and center, but pairs it with pragmatic geopolitics.
To safeguard India's interests in the long run.
Yes, in what's becoming a very strategically important and rapidly evolving part of the world.
Which leaves us with a final thought.
Mhm.
As the Arctic ice continues to melt, is India truly ready for the new currents of global power being revealed? And how will the choices it makes now shape its future role on the world stage?
A critical question indeed.
We really hope this deep dive into the Arctic's evolving landscape has given you valuable insights, especially for your UPSC preparation, highlighting just how interconnected global events really are.
Hmm.
If you found this analysis useful, please do like and subscribe for more discussions on crucial current topics, and share your own thoughts or any further questions in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
And just to reiterate, the source for today's discussion was the analysis published in The Hindu.